Something very curious about modern Western civilization. I consider it to be the most important thing of all. What is it? It appears to be a civilization that is essentially godless. It appears to be a civilization that is committed to materialism. It is a civilization which is constantly attacking religion and the religious way of life. And as a consequence of that war on religion, religion is in a state of decline around the world today. Yet, the reality is that modern Western civilization has come into being as a consequence of a reconciliation, a curious reconciliation, a rapprochement between some Christians and some Jews. And yet strangely, mysteriously, mystifyingly, in modern Western civilization, the world has witnessed for the first time and for the only time Jewish-Christian friendship and alliance. So this is not really about civilization. It appears to be.
There is I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
So what brings you to Christians United for Israel?
Well, I was in on the ground floor. I worked with John and Diana Hagee for many, many years on many different projects.
And how much of an inspiration is the second coming in your support for Israel?
Obviously, it's what I live for.
Really?
And I hope it comes tomorrow.
And God is doing a miraculous thing as now millions of Christians in the United States of America have rallied to the cause of Israel under Christians United for Israel, and we go to Washington once each year to give testimony to our congressmen and senators that we're Christians and that we're from your district and we vote for you or against you based on your support or lack thereof of the state of Israel.
Therefore, it is time for America to embrace the words of Senator Joseph Lieberman and consider a military preemptive strike against Iran to prevent a nuclear holocaust in Israel and a nuclear attack on America.
I have a deep sympathy for the Jewish people, and I think as Christians we owe them a deep apology for the incredible suffering that we've caused them over centuries, and that would apply also to Islam. I think that what they have gone through, and not least in the latter years under the Nazi Holocaust, I think is absolutely appalling, and the world did not help. So the modern state of Israel is almost a survival mechanism. I can understand why people who have been rejected by the world and treated like that should want a place of their own. Where I have a problem, though, is when Christians use the Bible to say that what's happening in Israel is a fulfillment of prophecy. Because when I was in Israel, what I found was a largely secular state. When you look at the way it operates vis-à-vis the Palestinians, you have to say it's founded on injustice and unrighteousness and cruelty. Now, if you're going to call that the fulfillment of prophecy, it has to be founded on righteousness.
What do we make of this? If that was the end of the story, that is already strange enough, but there's more to come. Modern Western civilization has witnessed not only this Jewish-Christian reconciliation and alliance, but more than that. This is the civilization which has an obsession with the Holy Land. But they also believe that history is going to end with events which will unfold in the Holy Land, as the Christians do, as the Jews do. Modern Western civilization has displayed its obsession with the Holy Land in many instances in history. How do we explain, for example, Britain, a secular state? 1917, and the British government issued the Balfour Declaration. What does it say? That the British government will work for the establishment of a Jewish national home in the Holy Land. That false Messiah, in order to impersonate the true Messiah, must rule the world from Jerusalem, from a state of Israel. It is modern Western civilization which presided over the return of the Jews to the Holy Land. Without the modern West, they could not have done it. It is modern Western civilization which created the state of Israel. The European people did it, not the Oriental Jews. When Britain acted as the midwife for the state of Israel to be born in 1948, I believe it was 11 minutes later that the United States recognized Israel.
The trouble is not with the Jews. The trouble is with Zionists. Jews don't like Zionists. Most Zionists are false Jews.
Unfortunately, something new has developed in the world in the last 100 years, a new movement and ideology, and that is called Zionism. People confuse Judaism and Zionism. They consider it one and the same. But it could be nothing further from the truth, because in actuality, Zionism is antithetical to Judaism. It is the diametric opposite. Judaism is a religion, a spirituality, to serve God, to be subservient to God, practiced by Jewish people for thousands of years, to emulate God. As in Hebrew we say, Mahu rachum af ata tehei rachum. Just as God is compassionate, you must be compassionate. Zionism is the transformation of Judaism into something new, entirely different, into nationalism, a political goal to have a land, to be a proud nation amongst nations, removing God from the equation. Judaism was the way of the Jewish people for thousands of years by all the God-fearing Jews. Zionism is 100 years old by non-practice created, concocted by non-religious Jews as a whole. Theodor Herzl, people who detested and abhorred the religion and looked for a way out, for a way to be considered still distinguished people and still remain not people who were thrown out of the community, so they gave themselves a new form of Judaism.
Congressman Julius Kahn presented Woodrow Wilson with a letter from three prominent Jewish Americans. They were Henry Berkowitz of Philadelphia, Max Senior of Cincinnati, and Professor Morris Jastrow of the University of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It read in part, "We raise our voices in warning and protest against the demand of the Zionists for the reorganization of the Jews as a national unit, to whom now or in the future territorial sovereignty in Palestine shall be committed. This demand not only misrepresents the trend of the history of the Jews, who ceased to be a nation 2,000 years ago, but involves the limitation and possible annulment of the larger claims of Jews for full citizenship and human rights in all lands in which those rights are not yet secure. We ask that Palestine be constituted as a free and independent state, to be governed under a democratic form of government recognizing no distinctions of creed, race, or ethnic descent, and with adequate power to protect the country against oppression of any kind. We do not wish to see Palestine either now or at any time in the future organized as a Jewish state."
The Torah is very clear in that when there was a decree of exile for the Jewish people 2,000 years ago, we were expressly told by God that we are forbidden to try to recreate our own establishment, our own entity. We are forbidden to have a state. Even in an uninhabited land, we must accept that our being expelled from the land of Palestine and the destruction of the temple was not because of our physical lacking, but only because of our spiritual lacking, that we were not on enough of a high level of spirituality. The books of the prophets are open, anybody can see and read that. And we yearn and pray as a Jewish people for the day when ultimately God will end this exile that we have been sent into by He Himself, without any human intervention, when all humanity will recognize the one God. There will be a metaphysical change in the world. As it states across from the United Nations in the conclave wall called the Isaiah Wall, that the day will come when they will beat the swords into plowshares. One nation will not pick up a sword against another nation. That is what we as a Jewish people must yearn and pray for. And until that day comes, we must be loyal citizens, exemplary people throughout the world to serve God, be subservient, and be kind-hearted, good people as God requires.
I start by saying that I'm a Palestinian with strong Armenian roots, with a commitment to serve Palestine as a whole. I am a product of a Palestine that was pre the State of Israel, with a birth certificate that says Palestine. And I think I have inherited that vision of that beautiful geographical spot that is a melting pot of different ethnic groups, which in my Christian faith is also the cradle of Christianity, but also the source of Judaism and Islam.
I know that when I visit AIPAC, I'm among friends, good friends. Friends who share my strong commitment to make sure that the bond between the United States and Israel is unbreakable today, unbreakable tomorrow, unbreakable forever. I have been proud to be a part of a strong bipartisan consensus that has stood by Israel in the face of all threats. That is a commitment. That is a commitment that both John McCain and I share, because support for Israel in this country goes beyond party. Our alliance is based on shared interests and shared values. Those who threaten Israel threaten us. Israel has always faced these threats on the front lines, and I will bring to the White House an unshakable commitment to Israel's security. We know that the establishment of Israel was just and necessary, rooted in centuries of struggle and decades of patient work. But 60 years later, we know that we cannot relent, we cannot yield, and as president, I will never compromise when it comes to Israel's security.
The messenger of Allah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, informed us of the release of Dajjal into the world during his lifetime. He went on to say that when Dajjal is released into the world, he would live on earth for 40 days. One day like a year, one day like a month, one day like a week, and the rest of his days like your days. The analysis conducted in this book is such that it argues that when Dajjal was in a day which is like a year, Britain was his headquarters. And when Dajjal moved to a day which is like a month, the United States of America became his headquarters. And finally, when Dajjal is going to be in a day which is like a week, he comes back home to the Holy Land. He comes back home to the Holy Land.
I've been saying to my audiences, if the Holy Land was liberated by a British army in November 1917, and that was just a chance military event, it happened by chance. If British rule over the Holy Land from 1918 to 1948 was just by chance. If the return of the Israelite people to the Holy Land 2,000 years after they had been expelled, and 2,000 years after they had been prohibited to return and they're back, to reclaim it as their own, if this is also by chance, if the birth of a state of Israel in 1948 in the Holy Land is also by chance, and if the growth of Israel to such a state of power that Israel appears to me, and of course only God doesn't make mistakes, Bishop, appears to me to be poised to take over from the United States very soon as the ruling state in the world. If all of these things can happen by chance, then, Bishop, the cow can also jump over the moon.
Not only has there been this curious relationship between Britain and the United States, Britain and the Holy Land and Israel, which you cannot explain with normal tools of political analysis, but also with the United States and Israel. Which political scientist there is in the world today who can offer a rational explanation for the curious relationship that exists between the United States and Israel? And modern Western civilization has armed Israel. Transfer of technology, transfer of military technology, massive economic aid, massive financial aid, to the extent that Israel is now a superpower. And to the extent that Israel is now poised to take over from the United States as the ruling state in the world. Modern Western civilization has an unwritten conception of the end of history, which is connected with the Holy Land. There is an actor at work in modern Western civilization, which is constantly using modern Western civilization to achieve his objective. There is an actor at work in modern Western civilization. There is an actor at work. I recognize that actor to be the false Messiah, Dajjal.
Dajjal has already completed his first phase, a day like a year. When Britain was the ruling state in the world and the sterling pound was the international currency. And then Dajjal moves to a day which is like a month, and the United States replaced Britain as the ruling state in the world. And the US dollar became the international currency. And now the United States is about to relinquish power, and Israel is about to replace the United States as the ruling state in the world. And what will be the new money?
Now it's September the 11th. The attack is now on the United States to bring down the United States as the ruling state in the world. But in the process of bringing it down, the United States have some very important work to do for Israel. I can identify tonight two very important things that the United States has to do for Israel. There are many more, but there's no need to do more than simply two. In order for Israel to succeed the United States as a ruling state in the world, not only must the US economy collapse and the US dollar collapse, and when the US dollar collapses, it brings down the whole world of paper money with it. And if you don't believe me, just wait. Just wait.
It's as if a doctor is finally confirming that nagging pain you've been feeling. Except in this case, it's not a physical pain, but an economic one. Today, the National Bureau of Economic Research officially handed down this financial diagnosis. The US is in a recession.
As the push for the movement of a new monetary system is afoot. What used to be brushed off as conspiracy theories can now be found in schools, clubs, corporate staff, military institutions, and even everyday advertisements.
Excuse me, sir. Forgot your receipt.
Checkout lines. Who needs them? This is the future of e-business.
Have a nice day.
In 1929, our world faced a recession, much like the one we are in today. Drastic measures were implemented. Will it be different this time?
RFID, or radio frequency identification chips, are tiny transmitters that can be attached to almost any product and scanned at a distance. Essentially, they're 21st century barcodes. When triggered, they transmit a unique code which can be received up to 10 meters away. They are being used by stores like Walmart as a way to track products around the world. RFID allows a company to know when a product is in the warehouse and when it is bought by a customer and taken home. In theory, you can even track the object after you've bought it. An American company called Verichip has taken the same RFID technology and is implanting the chip in humans. Technology that was brought in to track your Gillette razor can now be used to track and identify humans. And that's about to include me.
So just tell me about this microchip you're going to inject into my arm.
Yes, it's a first and only FDA-approved microchip to implant in humans.
Yes.
It uses RFID, radio frequency identification technology.
Yeah.
But the real purpose of this is it's a link to your personal and medical information on a secure website. So in a case of an emergency, if you were confused, comatose, or otherwise unable to communicate and presented to an emergency room, they would be able to scan you and pick up a unique 16-digit number, which is the only thing that's on this microchip,
yes,
and be able through that to access your medical record.
And what's the red bit?
The red is actually the antenna.
Yeah. Huh?
And if you look right back here, there's a very small microchip, and that's actually has the 16-digit number. If you ever decided to have it removed, it can be removed. It's a simple procedure to remove it.
It's like my barcode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're ready,
I'm ready.
Just relax.
Does this hurt?
It should not hurt at all. Okay, just relax.
Mm-hmm.
We are all done. I'm just going to now just double check and make sure it's working before I let you out of here. And you heard the beep.
Yes, I recognize the last
the
few
same
digits.
Number.
Yes, well, I don't recognize the whole number, but the last 4 digits are right. Yes.
Right, and it's the same number that we have in here, which is the same number
yes.
that we put in.
So that's me.
That's you now. Actually corresponds to this number.
Verichip has huge ambitions for their product, which was originally designed to tag pets. The CEO of Verichip recently promoted the idea that all migrant workers be chipped, and it has also been suggested that the entire US military receive implants. Verichips have already been implanted in several patients with degenerative brain conditions such as Alzheimer's, so they can be identified in a medical emergency. But the Verichip is old technology. The new generation of RFID chips will do much more than just transmit a code. Many states in America are considering putting them in driving licenses. They will be able to transmit all your personal details when they come within range of an RFID reader. The scheme is aimed at making the license harder to forge and more convenient for the police.
Such technology will not be forced upon the people. The people will line up voluntarily to receive them, just as we did with vaccines, GPS, Facebook.
The new money is going to be invisible money. You can't see it. It's going to be intangible money. You can't touch it. It's no longer possible for you to conceal how much money you have. Your enemy will know exactly how much money you have, even if you have it hidden underneath the pillow. Your enemy will not only know how much money you have, your enemy will know how you're spending your money.
this beast, this Antichrist, he rules over a colossus that is a world commercial system, a free trade system. That great city, Mystery Babylon, there is the code word in the Bible. That great city, which encompasses the whole world with its banking and corporate and commercial status.
To understand all the chaos in the world, and as we have been programmed, both biologically, physically, programmed mentally, intellectually, one must be aware of this being programmed like a computer.
The Quran says you are busy piling up, calculating, developing your careers, your money, your occupation, your wealth until you visit the graves. Think about it. When was the last time that you went to a funeral? What was the demeanor? Were the people cracking jokes? Were they dancing? Were they clapping and singing songs? No. Silence. Why? Because every person that walked in that room, seeing that person stretched out, the first thing they thought about was not the person. The first thing they thought about was that one day, this will be me.
A crisis which the politicians can never solve because they are programmed to think in a particular way. Nor the scientists can solve or understand the crisis, nor the business world, the world of money.
You have meddled with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beale, and I won't have it. Is that clear? You think you merely stopped a business deal. That is not the case. The Arabs have taken billions of dollars out of this country, and now they must put it back. It is ebb and flow, tidal gravity. It is ecological balance.
You are an old man who thinks in terms of nations and peoples. There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West. There is only one holistic system of systems. One vast and immane, interwoven, interacting, multivariate, multinational dominion of dollars. Petrodollars, electrodollars, multi-dollars, Reichmarks, rings, rubles, pounds, and shekels. It is the international system of currency which determines the totality of life on this planet. That is the natural order of things today. That is the atomic and subatomic and galactic structure of things today. And you have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone.
So Allah said, Alhaakumut Takathur. All of us, all of you are engaged in running your mouths, doing your business, multiplying, buying houses, cars, business, whatever you're doing. And when you're told about God, religion, life, morality, you're saying, look, I ain't got no time for that. I got no time for that. I don't want to hear that. See how arrogant people can be until they visit the funeral house.
So unless one is very, very serious, not flippant, not casual, but is concerned with the whole of humanity, and to understand this human behavior, human thought that has brought us all to this point.
And you say to yourself, is that it? I mean, 50, 60 years, scraping, struggling, scheming, lying, stealing, fornicating, jumping up and down, begging, working, and this is the end of it? I mean, is this what's going to happen to me? Are they going to be dropping me into a hole in the ground? A hole in the ground.
I disagree with you on Israel, but
in what way? You're not a supporter.
I hope Israel flourishes. I just don't think it's worth an American life or an American dollar.
What happens in the winter? All the leaves fall off the trees and the earth goes dead. And what happens in the springtime? The water comes, generates the earth again, germinates all over again, new grass, new leaves, new flowers, new fruits. So Allah says, and a sign for them is the dead earth. After that, we give it life. Then you eat the fruits from that. So Allah says, the one who gave you life in the beginning, is he not able to give you life all over again in order to judge you? Yes, certainly. You may want to deny it because you don't want to be judged.
And to us this living, which is misery, is we accept. If we didn't accept this existence as misery, then life and death are the same movement. Like love, death, and living are one. One must totally die to find what love is. And to go into this question of what is death, what lies beyond death, whether there is reincarnation, whether there is a resurrection, for all that becomes rather meaningless if you don't know how to live.
We now are a nation known to start war. We feel compelled because of our insecurity that we have to go over and attack these countries to maintain our empire. We have over 700 bases, we're in 130 countries, and we're talking about bombing Iran. It is such a dramatic change from what is truly American and truly constitutional.
I don't want to run the world. The Constitution doesn't give me the authority to run the world. We ought to mind our own business is what we need to do. Spending overseas, wasting money. This is a continuation of a revolution. It is a peaceful revolution. It's up to you to spread this message around this country. This is an American cause. It's a cause of freedom. There's something going on in this country, and it's big. Spread the message. Thank
you. Because there's a reason for humans to go inside the grave. If the Creator wanted to, He could have caused us to live and then disappear into the atmosphere. But He didn't. He caused us to go into another womb called the tomb. You started out in the womb of your mother and you wind up in the womb of the earth called the tomb.
The alternative is that civilizations don't last very long, but destroy themselves.
You see, this is one of them rare moments where your ass get a chance to be completely honest.
What do you see right now? You see exactly and only what I choose to show you. That is illusion, Ivy. That is the lie that I tell your eyes, making the magic happen in the moment, in that split second. But seeing behind it and knowing that it's all bullshit.
Yeah, you on some bullshit.
But I can shape it, I can shift it, I can make it as real as this room.
Our Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, has described the world of the Antichrist as one in which appearance and reality are completely opposite to each other.
appearance and reality are always different from each other.
You know, when I wanted to understand the industrial food system, what I set about doing was very simple. I wanted to trace the source of my food. When you go through the supermarket, what looks like this cornucopia of variety and choice is not. There is an illusion of diversity. There are only a few companies involved, and there are only a few crops involved. What really surprised me most, as I followed that food back to its source, I kept ending up in the same place, and that was a cornfield in Iowa. So much of our industrial food turns out to be clever rearrangements of corn.
We are now engineering our foods. We know where to turn to for certain traits like mouthfeel and then flavors, and we bring all of these pieces together, engineer new foods that don't stale in the refrigerator, don't develop rancidity. Of course, the biggest advance in recent years was high fructose corn syrup. You know, I would venture to guess, if you go and look on the supermarket shelf, I'll bet you 90% of them would contain either a corn or soybean ingredient. And most of the time will contain both.
Cows are not designed by evolution to eat corn. They're designed by evolution to eat grass. And the only reason we feed them corn is because corn is really cheap, and corn makes them fat quickly.
The animals evolved on consuming grass. There's some research that indicates that the high corn diet results in E. coli that are acid resistant, and these would be the more harmful E. coli.
And a certain mutation occurs, and a strain called E. coli 0157H7 appears on the world stage. And it's a product of the diet we're feeding cattle on feedlots, and it's the product of feedlot life. The animals stand ankle deep in their manure all day long, so that if one cow has it, the other cows will get it. When they get to the slaughterhouse, their hides are caked with manure. And if the slaughterhouse is slaughtering 400 animals an hour, how do you keep that manure from getting onto those carcasses? And that's how the manure gets in the meat.
Sometimes you look at a vegetable and say, okay, well, we can get 2 hamburgers over here for the same amount of price.
Why is it that you can buy a double cheeseburger at McDonald's for 99 cents and you can't even get a head of broccoli for 99 cents? We've skewed our food system to the bad calories, and it's not an accident. I mean, the reason that those calories are cheaper is because those are the ones we're heavily subsidizing. But when you're engineering foods, you are pressing our evolutionary buttons. I mean, the fact is we're hardwired to go for 3 tastes: salt, fat, and sugar. These things are very rare in nature.
It is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit.